starting with the media, but then I hope it's also going to have some repercussions among the political sphere, but also the police, because even though we saw that in France after the Me Too hashtag, there was actually a raise of 80% of such crimes being reported to the police. But the problem is that even after that, you have only 3% of those, how to say, plaintes, like complaints that actually lead to someone going to jail. So I hope it's going to have some repercussions among other spheres and not only the media one.
Thanks, Rebecca. Michael is an award-winning Hollywood screenwriter. Among his previous films, I believe, include The Jerk, and Lush Life, and Frisco Kid. And he's a quintessential Hollywood insider. So with that in mind, you must have heard rumours about Harvey Weinstein and his behaviour, and it's now all coming out in the wash. I'm just curious to know, as a man who's been working in the industry for many, many years, what was your initial response and reaction when you heard the news?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not really a Hollywood insider. We got divorced. It was mutual. I talked to a lot of people about Harvey Weinstein, and it was always the same conversation. Should we take our movie to Harvey Weinstein? Should we develop a television show for Harvey Weinstein? And the reaction from these people was usually, no fucking way. The man is a monster, he's a creep, he's a bully, he'll ruin your film, he'll steal your money, and so forth. However, none of these people ever said he's also a sexual predator, a rapist, and the reason this never came up was because all the people I'm referring to were men. And the truth of the matter is they didn't care about that part of his character or whatever. So that's, and I actually never heard the rumors, but I'm not an actor. I'm not an actress. I'm middle management, writer, producer, sometimes director. It just never, that part didn't get to me. My stepdaughter is, she's a writer, and she knew actresses, and she hung out with them, and they told her, and she knew. So, yeah, I was surprised. Not surprised, but it was, and then revelation after revelation, and more and more and more, and just horrific. I mean, anyway.
I just want to follow up from that, though, because we've all heard about the casting couch. So, therefore, with that in mind, I'm interested to say you were surprised because, you know, many of us in the broader community as such had always been aware of such patterns of behaviour.
Well, I think now, maybe it was different then. Now, if you cast the wrong person in a part, you're in a lot of trouble. But it doesn't mean that you can't exploit and take advantage, terrorize a lot of women around that part. So you want somebody who will make money for you as a producer, as a studio, and nobody will tolerate, I hired her because she went to bed with me and she turns out to be a lousy actress. You're going to be out of the business. On the other hand, you can advertise your ability to hire somebody or even get them into an audition and meet them and exploit them in the process. That's I think, more the casting couch than actually, if you sleep with me, you will get the part. But there's, you know, for guys like Harvey Weinstein, there was nothing lost in trying it anyway, no matter what the stature of the actor or the actress was. I mean, if he could say that to Charlize Theron or
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Gwyneth Paltrow, man, I mean, it's, so anyway, that's one.
And I mean, what's happened as a result of all this is that it's gone well beyond Hollywood. It's cutting across all spheres of society, and certainly now, if we turn our attention across the Atlantic to Congress, as somebody just said the other day, the only way to rid Congress of sexism is to vote in more women. End of story. However, between where we are at the moment and getting more women into politics, what needs to be done?
Well, you can't argue with the theory that if you have more women helping to make the decisions, you're going to have a more equitable process that reflects more the best that a country has to offer. Anytime you diversify, I think it's a fair statement that you're going to get better results. As far as ridding an institution, a powerful institution based on hierarchical power, often based historically on ultimate hierarchical power. I mean, the members of any legislature are there at the pleasure of the voters, but once they get in there, it's, especially in the American system, it's kind of a job for life, especially in the Senate. So where's the accountability for that kind of behavior going to come from? I think it's too simple to say that if you elect more women, you're going to reduce the amount of exploitation by people of flawed character and no morals. You're always going to have those in a group of people. I think what you need to do is start further back. You get good people in there, you hope, and the way you know they're good is that you've effectively required them to behave properly by changing the culture, by changing the standards. There have been plenty of commentaries written about this. It's not an unusual thought or an original thought, but if this kind of behavior didn't work on some level, it wouldn't be done. If people who abuse their power were punished for abusing their power over people who are more vulnerable than they wouldn't do it. If people lost status and lost leadership positions and lost face because this is how they behaved, they wouldn't do it. The simple truth is that this kind of behavior, whether it's in Congress or business or Hollywood or wherever, is a manifestation of a certain kind of aggressiveness that most of the time is displayed by men. Not always, but most of the time. And the minute you stop saying, well, that's all great, that just shows he's a real tough SOB who knows how to get things done, and yeah, he's got to ruffle some feathers, but after all, look at the results. Once you disconnect the means from the end, and you scrutinize the means, and you say, wait, that doesn't work here anymore, that's enough to get you bounced, then you start changing what's going on. I'd like to think that there are no women in the world who would ever play that game. We know that's not true, but I don't think it's just a simple matter of getting more women into the chambers of power. It's changing the nature of and rewards of power.
And just to follow up from that, I mean, this is an illness, if you want, probably not the best word to use to describe this form of behaviour, but it goes right across the political spectrum. I mean, we're here at a Democrats Abroad function, and there have been some prominent Democrats, including Bill Clinton, who've been accused of such behaviour. Do we, for people who are of liberal-leaning values, do we tend to go softer, if you like, on men from that side of the political spectrum, especially when you look at the debate now surrounding Al Franken?
Well, the question we all knew was coming, right? We're Democrats abroad. It's not just, this cuts across all party lines. I don't know if any of you's ever had a chance to see Gretchen Carlson's TED Talk that she did recently about her experience of being sexually harassed throughout her career, starting when she was wearing her Miss America crown and all the way through Fox News. Her statement, which is as true coming from her mouth as from anybody's, is sexual harassment, before somebody decides to take advantage of you, they don't ask whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And before we judge whether someone has abused power, it would be nice to think we wouldn't also ask the question, and we would not ask the question, what political side does he or she come from? The fact is, we probably are easier on powerful people whose views we share, because they're in a position to do a lot of good. There was even I believe it was a Democratic operative who, talking about back in the Clinton days when when Bill was accused of asking a woman for oral sex against her will, this Democratic operative said, "I'd give him oral sex if he protects abortion rights. Sure, why not?" It was a lighthearted comment that people laughed at. We're still laughing at it, but the fact is, we gave him a pass. The society gave him a pass, and I think people are recognizing that now. Some people recognized it then, but there are Republicans. Look at the Roy Moore situation now. There are people who are giving him a pass, in part because with the polarization of American politics now, somebody said, anybody's better than a Democrat. That's obviously not true. But there are people who are looking the other way for him because of his political affiliation. So yeah, it happens. Did you want to say something?
Do you want to add to that, Rebecca or Michael?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot because I love Al Franken. And 3 days ago, or 4 days, whatever it was, I was saying he should be our presidential candidate. And we were both comedians, and I like him for that. It's really hard. And I don't know, maybe we need, like South Africa, a truth commission. And everybody can tell the truth, confess, and apologize, and move on, because there isn't a man that I know who is innocent in his whole life. We were raised to be that way, and we were taught that way. And what are you going to do? I mean, I'm really stymied, and there are good people who are being accused of this, and there are bad people who are being accused, and they've done it. I'm not saying they didn't do it, and I'm not saying they were lied or set up or anything like that.
So you're saying you were raised to harass women? I don't quite understand.
Well, I'm saying when I was a kid, I went to the movies, and a cowboy grabbed a girl and he kissed her, and she punched him on the chest, and he kept kissing her. And then she punched him again. She said, no, 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 no. And he kept kissing her, and then she said, and she melted into his arms. That's how I grew up. That's what I was taught to do.
Well, the famous photo from World War II with the guy
Yeah,
kissed the girl.
so I'm not saying that, and I said, okay, that's going to be my mode of operation from now on. Fortunately, I had a mother, I had sisters, and I had smart parents, and I had, and I knew that at a certain point. But I'm saying that's what and in the same way you were taught to smoke. There has been an education. Men are educated in a certain way of behavior. It's made attractive. It's made to make you feel more manly, and you end up being a putz. Sorry. So.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, and it's very interesting what you said about comparing it to how we all used to smoke, because I interviewed Anne-Marie Slaughter a few years back, and she said the thing about women's rights and dealing with sexism is we need to look at what is changeable, what is doable, when you only have to look at the anti-smoking campaign, and how in a lifetime we've changed habits. It can happen, and it will happen. With that in mind, Rebecca, I want to ask you something. I was talking to a young feminist a number of months ago, and she said to me, don't underestimate the amount of anger that young women have as they enter the workforce, when they discover that not much has changed since their mum and dad started working too, and that there is a lot of anger out there. Is that what we're witnessing at this moment, and particularly here in France?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all very, very angry. And we're angry for all sorts of reasons. The fact that we're entering a sexist workforce culture is one. And also that we started to work when it was the economic crisis. So basically when we finished college, there was no work. And so we were like, okay, so what did our parents do? Like, basically nothing to end up this sexist culture. and to create a world in which we could have a meaningful job and also to make money out of it. But I just wanted to say something after what you said, and especially about why women in political parties didn't say anything even after Strauss-Kahn or after Denis Baupin in France. The thing is that we actually saw that, I think it was a few days ago, the president of Les Jeunes Socialistes, sorry, which is the movement of the young socialists, the left-wing party here, was actually accused by dozens of women of being harassing them, sorry. And you could actually see footage of him saying, I'm a feminist, I want equality between women and men, and I want equal pay and everything. And what is interesting is, first of all, there was some kind of loyalty from those women to their party, and they wanted to say, okay, we want things to change, but the thing is that we need this structure and we need this organization to change them. So they were like, okay, this thing happened to me, but I don't want to endanger the course of this greater thing that we're doing here. So they were like, okay, so I'm gonna be, like, what happened to me wasn't that important compared to the great work that we should do. And the second thing is that if they actually talked, they had to stop politics. And this is what happened to, I think her name is Sandrine Rousseau, who was one of the women who accused Denis Baupin. She had to stop politics because she was no longer welcome in her own party for saying that one of the members harassed her, and she had no other choice but quitting it. So basically those women wanted to do the greater good, and if they actually said that something was wrong with their party, it's not like they made her go out of the thing, but they are actually doing it for themselves.
I mean, I think the one thing about that, and Anne and I were talking about this earlier, is how demographics are now in women's favour by the sheer number of women entering the workforce. The highest ever number of women are now in the workforce than ever before. Record numbers at university, in various spheres. They're obviously, given those demographics, there has to be a tipping point. And as with women going further up the food chain and being in positions of power, is what is going to lead to change? I'll start by asking you, Anne.
Well, I think that's going to help. I have a 26-year-old daughter, and I'm not the only one in the room who has a daughter in that generation. I'm actually quite encouraged when I see the attitude of the young women today to just not take any more of this shit. They're in a different position than we were at the beginning of our careers. We were, in some senses, a pioneering generation, first woman this, first woman that, first woman law partner, one of the very few women in the medical school class, etc. The pressures at that time to conform, to not be a woman, were enormous. It's not the case now, and a lot of that is the experience that we had, the trails that we blazed, but it has to do with numbers. It has to do with the fact that women are no longer the only one woman in a room full of men. In most cases, with the exception, of course, of certain industries, I think Wall Street is still pretty much a male bastion, but there are women walk into a room and they're not the only woman. So they do feel as though they have friends, they have company, they're supported.
Isn't there this notion that comes from quantum physics of critical mass when you get to about 33%, that all of a sudden things begin to change? So it doesn't have to be 50%, it's just 30%, and then that can really start to change the conversation. And I think they show now there's 30% producers in Hollywood, 30% women in Congress, not in the Senate yet, but in Congress. In all these fields where women have reached 30%, there is systemic change.
And that's one reason why some countries, including I think Norway, have enacted laws that a certain percentage of corporate boards need to be women. And they've chosen that percentage carefully to make sure that there's critical mass. And that has produced change. But to your question about what the younger generation will do, I take your point, Rebecca, that there are women who would have wanted to speak up, or if they did, they paid a very high price. Gretchen Carlson's TED Talk made the same point, that of all the women she spoke to, hundreds of women who were sexually harassed and who spoke up, none of them is still working in the field that she complained about. The repercussions were harsh. I don't have a crystal ball, and I am sure that there will still be harsh repercussions for some people who speak out. But over the years, with the experience of women who've spoken up and have made a difference, and women and men, young men too, let's not forget that. It's not really about men and women, it's about powerful and not powerful. There are plenty of unpowerful men who've been victimized too. I think with every cycle of denunciation, repercussion, backlash, things get a little bit better.
Michael.
I see hope in my son, who's you're 25, and Bianca's son, who's 25, 26. They're so far advanced. They're great, and I have real faith in them and their hope. The other thing I think that needs to be done in Hollywood, which has a lot of very powerful women, who, and when I first got there, for some reason, I dealt mostly with women executives, head of studios, Sherry Lansing. Nobody was going to push Marcy Carsey around, who had ended up with a multi-billion-dollar franchise from the Cosby Show, strangely enough. And Diane, I can't remember. Anyway, this part of the solution for Hollywood is to make sure that women are running all these television shows and get rid of all these jerks, because they won't allow it on their shows. And I know that, say Marcy Carsey or I can't remember her name. Anyway, is it that if they ran the television shows, they wouldn't have them. They wouldn't be like that. And Hollywood is a strange place where where people have power, especially directors. Directors have power, and they look at actors as pawns to be moved around the chessboard. You go here, you go here, you go here. And then after a while, they start to believe that they have real personal power over them too. So they say, you go here, give me 25% more. I want you to be crying more. I want you to do this. I want you to come to my bedroom and allow me to masturbate in front of you. That's the psychology, and that's what happens. And you get rid of them. Get rid of every one of them and replace them with Patty Jenkins and all these wonderful women directors. It's not going to happen until that happens.
Michael, sorry, Anne.
One just very, very brief data point. One of the most interesting things I read about as I was doing research for this evening was about a guy called Bill Lawrence, who's a showrunner who basically runs successful comedies. He runs Scrubs. He runs a show called Cougar Town, which is about an older woman who preys on younger men and for laughs. Apparently he's got a no asshole policy.
I gave him his first job.
Did you? Well done. Why I'm not surprised.
He was a junior writer on our show. Okay.
I'm not surprised. He has what's known as a no asshole policy on his sets. He will simply, he makes it known, he's only going to hire people he feels comfortable with, and if anybody acts like an asshole, they're gone. And he's able to do it, and he produces quality television. So it's not true you have to be an asshole.
Okay, so it is possible. Before I just ask Rebecca, I'm just very quickly explain that after I finish asking a couple more questions, it will be open to you guys. So just hang on.
Women.
No, there's. No, sorry, you're right. I use that in a very Australian generic sense. Men and women. Thank you.
Women. Say guys, you say women. They can be in minority.
Rebecca, France is a very hierarchical country, and that plays through in a lot of its interactions between people, regardless of the gender issue. But it certainly doesn't help in terms of sexist attitudes, and if anything, it probably entrenches them that much more. Correct?
Yeah, it's a culture in which people tend to say that if they're not harassing women, they just seducing them. And it's something that we hear often here. It's like, no, I didn't harass this woman, I just tried to seduce her. And this is something like really typical of the French culture. Another thing that I wanted to highlight about this culture is that Actually, I think that the change is not coming from white women. I think that women of color actually played a major role here in making this whole movement as powerful as it is. And actually, even in the US, I actually learned that the Me Too hashtag was invented a decade ago by an Afro-feminist woman called Mrs. Burke. And what was interesting is that nobody actually believed her until it was a bunch of white actresses that were saying the exact same thing, but the thing is that the harasser was more famous. And of course, at that point, people started to believe them. And I think that in France, you have a lot of women of color who are activists and that are really changing the culture from the basic roots, because as a white woman, you were like more easily offered to get a position to be equivalent of men, you know, and it's not necessarily the same thing for women of color. So I think that they're doing a really tremendous job here, and especially on social networks.
Thank you, and that's a very much a point. The other thing about all this is, this time around, what makes it different, and again, I'm directing the question to all three panelists, is how men have stepped up.
Sorry, what?
How men have stepped up in terms of embracing the campaign #MeToo, of talking openly about how wrong it is and so on. But they have to do more than just sort of, you know, say the right thing. What do men need to do in terms of changing their behaviour? And how can we as women help them?
I can start. They can start by giving up their privileges and give those privileges to people who don't have them. And they can start by creating a society in which women, of course, have more position, and hire more women who are capable of doing those jobs and not have those, how to say, like connivence, like, you know, like this brotherhood that exists in this society. And we as women, we also have our duty to create a sisterhood. We need to
Which is not very much present here in France, is it? Unlike Anglo-American societies.
Well, I hope it's getting more and more. This is what I'm trying to do with my political organization, get more women, like more female solidarity. And I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's not really common in the French society to have the sisterhood, but I think like with the younger generation, the new generation, it's more and more present. And also thanks to the American culture, we see those TV shows, we see those movies in which you could actually glorify, you can see glorified squads between women. And I think French women says, okay, so this is possible. We don't have to be jealous all the time, and we don't have to do mean stuff to other women. And I think in that sense, there's a great influence, American influence, among the young generation of women.
Oh, I think sue and arrest would go a long way. I don't think that lawsuits, arresting, I think that charging, going to the police, not to HR.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the Catholic Church with their scandal. Why don't you just go to the police? Not just, but to go to the superior. And there's one other thing, which is I don't trust anybody. I say the male Hollywood establishment. When a decision is made to cancel a show because the star is a sexual aggressor, is that an economic decision? Is that a decision that is made in solidarity with women? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So I don't, all of this, I mean, I know certain things are going to change. May I continue?
Yes, please.
I know certain things are going to change. You will never be told to go to a hotel room to meet a producer. No agent will ever do that again to you. And agents have done that to their clients over and over and over again. Now they're going to be sued. CAA agents who said, Harvey Weinstein's assistant will meet you in the lobby of the Peninsula Hotel, and the assistant said, I'll take you up to Harvey. That agent is now going to be sued for being complicit in the rape of his client. And that's as it should be. And they all knew it. Because the star or the actress came back and said, he tried to rape me. Oh, I'm really, that's sorry. Well, get an apology. And then the next actress, he sends it to the same thing. So I think that.
And some of those assistants were women.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly. So everybody, there's complicity. So I think, but things are different now. Nobody will audition a woman alone. It'll be like a doctor's office. You won't go for an examination without a nurse in the room, and that's really good. It's really good.
That doesn't exist in France.
No?
No, that's true.
Oh.
That's true. That's true. I'll go back to something I said before. I think it's true that putting some pigs in jail is going to help. Just like putting some fat cats in jail might have helped a lot on Wall Street.
Yeah.
I'll just go out on a limb with that one. But I think it goes back to what kind of behavior, what kind of character is prized, respected, and rewarded in any enterprise. If leadership is to do things like this, and rewards come your way if you do things like this, if you give in to the devils of your nature, let's say, we're just talking from the point of view of the abuser, then you're going to keep doing it because there's no reason not to. It's Michael, you make a good point about the economics of it. It's really tough to beat capitalism. And capitalism's god is money. So if there's money to be made, regardless of this kind of characterless behavior, it's going to be made. The only time I think you see real change is when this kind of behavior is so stigmatized that anybody who displays it loses whatever status, whatever opportunity they might have had to make money or to become a big shot. And maybe you're seeing some of that. Maybe Harvey Weinstein is never ever going to come back from this. But you know what? People have come back from it. We have terrible examples of us right in front of it. We've got Mel Gibson, who was supposedly box office poison, to use an old-fashioned expression. Just got nominated, big time for the Oscars last year for his film, and is now out promoting another film that's tipped for the Oscars. We have Roman Polanski, which is a whole other sort of wrinkle of this, judge the artist, not the art, okay? We can talk about that later. I imagine somebody might want to talk about that. People do come back from this because the god in certain areas is money and success.
We have Trump.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yep.
you have to go so far as Hollywood. Look at the games that children play. Look at the GTA, where the call starts out with rape scene, like almost it's a woman being aggressed. And the young kids are watching this. Then they go to college and they rape girls and they get off with it. It's like, what are the men gonna do? Men are gonna teach their sons to be correct.
It's a leadership issue.
It is.
There's another wonderful TED Talk, this guy Jackson Katz, who's head of a group called Mentors in Violence Protection. They sort of popularized the idea of bystander initiatives. We're all, if you see something, say something. If you see something going down, you should say something about it. And to him, this isn't sensitivity, this isn't equality, this isn't it's leadership. Leaders don't do this.
It's not just human agency, though, and it's really important human agency, but it's also linguistics. We never say, as you just did, they teach their sons to go rape. We always say, when we talk about these kinds of scenarios, that she was raped, right? As if she is a passive object who had no control, no agency, no autonomy, no nothing. She's just a passive object that is aggressed by the male. And the male is removed of responsibility by not being an agent. He's not the subject of the sentence. He's the passive.
Okay, at this point I'm just going to ask my final question because I feel I need to say this as a member of the media. One thing that we have, we're very good at pointing the finger in other direction, but I do fear that many of my peers have trivialised this at times as a story. For instance, the noted BBC Radio 4 host John Humphreys, when interviewing Conservative peer William Hague recently, asked him about the accusations that are now being said about various members of Parliament in Westminster. Was there a witch hunt underway, and had it gone too far? equally you had Alec Baldwin, who was said, when asked about this, well, look at all those women who accepted payments to keep silent. Aren't they equally as guilty? So as a final thing, again, I'm going to ask who in the panel would like to talk about this, is the role of the media as well, which is equally as important in terms of reinforcing role models, in terms of challenging people in terms of their mindsets and making the unfamiliar familiar. How important is it?
Media here. False equivalency is what you're talking about in some of the instances that you cited. Horrible thing happened. Yeah, but on the other hand, there was some other sort of awful thing that happened on the other side. Don't they cancel each other out? This was a big issue for my peers in journalism during the campaign, and it's a big issue for them now. Everything that Trump has said, done, and intends to do, and has gotten other people to do, versus Hillary's emails.
Yeah, right.
It's a problem. When journalists try to look objectively at all sides of an issue, we are obliged, as you know well, to try to get all sides and to try to determine the truth based on having looked at all sides. And sometimes that leads you down a false path, the path of false equivalency. I'm not so sure that it's the media's role to come down on one side or another. I do think it's our role to report all sides and let the readers decide for themselves what is worthy of attention and what isn't. When it comes to these issues, the Weinstein affair, none of this would even be, we wouldn't even be here talking about this if it wasn't for the incredible bravery of Jodi Kantor, Megan Twohey, and let's just say it right now, and
Ronan Farrow.
I was gonna
Ronan
say,
Farrow, and their editors, who allowed them to pursue the story without fear or favor. They did a hell of a job doing that. I'm sure it never occurred to them to think, well, are we going too far with this? And that's a fine thing. But I do think you will probably see people who will exploit the media's desire to be the better person and to look at all sides of it, to try to pump up the volume on the other side and lead all of us down the path of false equivalency. I hope we can be vigilant and not do that.
Michael, Rebecca?
My only worry is that this makes Hollywood better and it doesn't make the rest of the world better. And that Hollywood is visually self-correcting, and yet 2 women every day are murdered by their husbands, boyfriends, and spouses. And there are women in shelters all over America. There are women homeless all over America who are the victims of real violence, who don't have the means to sue or to put their jobs in jeopardy or risk their children. And as I said, I take comfort in what's happening in Hollywood, but I don't take comfort in the fact that it may not be reaching out to other parts and other societies. I don't know, is the military? I thought you were going to say that one of the things that was the most amazing revelations in the last 10 years was what goes on in the military. So, anyway.
Excuse me, I'm wondering, did Donald Trump actually say anything about the Weinstein case? Did he actually come out with a statement about what he thought about it?
Yeah, he said that he was a friend of Hillary's and gave her a lot of money.
That's all he said.
No, he also said anybody who knows the world isn't surprised or something.
Anyway,
Do we care?
let Rebecca
Let her-
Rebecca finish, and then we can.
Yeah, well, I'm not as confident as you are about Hollywood. I think that Hollywood has been doing a great job of pretending for a long time, and I'm not sure that this is going to change everything, just the Weinstein case. I hope it will, but I'm really not sure. I think if it's going to change, it's going to need to have repercussions among the medias. But as a structure, and also how do you say, like the police system and all the different systems that are, what do you say?
Judicial system.
Yeah, okay, I can't pronounce this one. But I think that I've been an activist for about 4 years now, and I think that the medias have been my best allies so far, because there was this generation of women who were actually interested in our stories, interested in women's stories, and they made our stories legitimate in this society. And I think if it wasn't for the media, I wouldn't be, like, my political group wouldn't be as successful as it is right now.
Thank you very much. At this point, we're going to open it up to questions from the floor. Let me start with Sheila.
Michael said that men have to be taught to not to behave that way, to be taught to respect women and not to want violence and not, but it's the same with women. Women also are taught by our society and by the capitalist values that you mentioned to be in that situation. So women also have to be taught and have to learn not to accept this kind of behavior. And it's very hard. What if a woman really wants to be an actress? I mean, it's very hard for her to say, well, I won't do it because I have to go through all of this all the time. I have to say no, it's very difficult, etc. Another thing, I have a pet peeve when people say women among themselves are always criticizing each other and are jealous and things like that. But it's about their false equivalency. Men do irritating things like that as well that are destructive, and men are far, far, far more competitive, for example. So I decided I would never say that again about women, that they are jealous of each other, that they're backbiting, that they're always making trouble for each other. I don't think it's true. I think women are very, very solidaire, and so I think that's what we have to do. Everybody has to be taught. Everybody has to learn behavior, and I think that you're all right. I think suing and jailing are probably the best things.
Gentleman in the red shirt.
What occurs to me whenever I hear the conversation about electing more women to office is that in the United States, you know, we have, among white women, I think Trump won this last election. It's only really women of color who push the women's vote against him. So white women in the United States still vote against their own interests and support someone like Trump. So when you talk about more women running for office, or a critical mass where you tip the balance, it seems to me it's not just women, it has to be progressive women. Because there are an awful lot of horrendous women politicians in the United States, and some really regressive, reactionary people.
Okay, just a reminder, can we actually have questions? Because the point of this is to direct questions to the panelists. The young lady here with the black jacket, and then
I'm wondering if we could turn back to a question of agency, especially as we examine the dialogue that takes place between harassers and their victims or the survivors. I mean, in the second of the Al Franken apologies, after the second apology, the woman that he assaulted, she accepted his apology. And I think that as someone who obviously really likes and agrees with Al Franken's politics, if not at all his personal decisions, what do we do with the apology and the acceptance of the apology? Does that woman get to decide for us if we cast him out, as I think we should? Do we get to say that, okay, no, maybe we can moderate our response to him and it doesn't have to be, you know, on to the next ice flow? What do we do with that, and how do we moderate our response based on the reaction of the woman in question?
Anne, do you want, or Michael?
Well, you know, when Mel Gibson was caught or taped making anti-Semitic comments to a cop in Malibu who arrested him for drunken driving. He apologized to Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who is the rabbi in Beverly Hills and runs the Holocaust Center. And the rabbi accepted his apology. And my reaction was, well, I didn't accept his apology, and who is this guy who accepted his apology on my behalf? So that's one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is there is a part that says, look, he grabbed her ass, if that's whatever he did this thing, and he apologized, and she said, I accept your apology. That's a pretty good exchange, I think, isn't? I mean, do we then have to say, well, I don't accept your apology to this woman or this man? I don't think so.
Okay, Lisa?
I'll be a little devil's advocate.
Do you want to stand up, Lisa, so we can...
The whole thing with Al Franken is that, okay, what he did, if he did it, because what he said very clearly was, I apologize, but I don't remember it happening this way.
He said more than that.
No, he didn't. He did. Okay. But the point is, there's now other things coming out about her, about things she's done. She's a Trump supporter. I'm not defending him. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not in Hollywood. This is not my... But my fear is that there's too many cases now that are going to come out. There's a big difference between what a schmuck like Harvey Weinstein has done and what maybe Al Franken did very stupidly or not when he was not in politics.
So what?
And in a different position. So how do we, my question is, how do we keep it
How do you draw the red line?
How do you draw the red line, and how do we keep it from escalating and potentially destroying people's careers and lives?
Okay, and that was the question I was going to ask. So I want to open that up to panelists because it's not just these people are here to answer your questions. So let me start with Anne.
Okay.
Where do you draw the red line?
Well, I think everybody draws a line for themselves, but I think one thing it's important. The French have a wonderful expression for things like this. Il faut pas tout mélanger. Don't mix everything up in the same pot. To your question about agency and who accepts what apology, the personal exchange between victim and aggressor has its place, and that's how they may perhaps resolve things between them. But Al Franken, if this is who we're talking about, is also an elected official, and it's up to the people who elected him to decide for themselves whether that's enough. Because it's not, he's getting attention for this because he is an elected official. It is going to have an effect on his ability to represent the people of Minnesota, which is what he was elected to do. I think everybody, as I say, draws the line for themselves. I've seen lots and lots of commentary, people who aren't defending any improper behavior, but who are saying there is a difference between rape and just doing something really stupid. Perhaps from the point of view of the victim, the effect is the same. And who are we to quantify the effects of rape versus derailing a career versus undermining someone's confidence for the rest of their life? All of these are awful things. But it's a line that I think everybody draws for themselves.
Yeah, but the law makes a difference there. I'm sorry.
Okay, there's this lady here in the back who's been waiting very patiently with the black jumper.
Hi. This whole subject has resuscitated a memory for me that I discussed in depth this weekend with friends of sexual harassment that I lived. And it was a very long time ago, and I was very lucky in the end in how my life went. But it was a woman who was my boss who sexually harassed me, fired me unjustly. And so it makes me think a lot about the dynamics of power.
Yes.
And that this is really an issue about power and nuance. And so I wonder about how the media can inject nuance into this coverage, because it's not just a finger pointing issue. It's complicated. Yeah. You know, it has to do with relationships and desire and and life paths and all sorts of things that are really not easily shrunk down into a headline.
Okay, that's something probably I can also talk about, because that's the reason why we have the show, 51%, which is the fact, unfortunately, it's only 12 minutes long. And we are here and we're an hour into a conversation which inevitably is going to continue. And yes, I think the media has to play a very important role in all of this, as we do with many other issues. We're driven, unfortunately, by format and time, particularly in broadcast. The average news story is 1:30.
Right.
Okay, you know,
But in print, there's more time.
there is more time, but not everybody reads print these days. You know, it is mainly online, and it's
But
also
they read online.
They read online, but you know, again, it is. I'm not trying to excuse, but like anything, there are logistical considerations and all this. It is multiple shades of grey. That is our job as a journalist, is to show that it isn't black and white, that it is highly nuanced. And trust me, as a former Middle East correspondent, 7 years in Jerusalem taught me that. And I'm going to just pass this on to you, because and Rebecca and Michael, if you want to weigh into this, please do so.
Yeah. I think your concerns are quite
I work in the
justified.
media, by the way.
Okay.
On the
Okay.
marketing and advertising side, so.
Okay. This is a very long conversation about the role of the media and also the ways in which we craft stories and cover stories. I'll just say two things very briefly. First of all, you're quite right that in print you have more time, and pixels are unlimited in their space. I can speak most authoritatively about the New York Times, where I used to work, but I know that all of the mainstream quality journalistic outlets are investigating different ways of telling stories, not just an 800-word news story in which the lead paragraph talks about something that happened yesterday. There are lots of different ways of telling stories. Video, listicles, we laugh about them, but they're great ways of getting certain stories across. The broad spectrum of opinion pieces that you can read. Even cartooning helps get at the essence of some of these more difficult issues. So as advice for anyone who wants to try to keep abreast of this, I would say read widely. I'm sure that whatever nuance, whatever issue, whatever stand you're looking for to excite you, to comfort you, to send you off in another direction, you're going to find it. Just read as widely as you possibly can, which is not easy to do in this day and age. But in some ways it's easier than it used to be because of the availability of all these outlets. And the second thing I would say very, very briefly is let's talk afterwards, because one of the things the media is doing more of and needs to do more of is asking readers, how do we tell this story? What are your ideas for how to do this? It's probably something we've never thought of, and we'd love to hear it.
Great.
And also I would say listen to podcasts as well. And just another follow-up to that is you pointed out an excellent point there in terms of the fact that look at Kevin Spacey. Yeah. And there was a classic example of somebody abusing their power. It wasn't the traditional male versus younger female dynamic. Okay, I'm going to swing around to this gentleman here. Then, is there a microphone?
Should I wait for the microphone?
Yeah. All right, yeah. Grab it.
Again, the media is well represented. I've been working in media in one form or another for 30 years. My concern as now a consumer of media is, given the context of where we are with the Trump administration and the post-truth world, and watching, first I was very heartened by all of these stories coming out and people being punished for their behavior. And then about 2 or 3 days ago, I started to think, I, as someone who believes in all of this and was raised by a 1970s feminist mom, it was very in favor of everything I was seeing happening. All of a sudden I realized even I am becoming fatigued by all of this. There are so many stories coming forward. Pretty soon it's just we're all gonna become tired of the story. And this great moment that we have been hoping is gonna happen is just gonna tire us all out, because we're now 2017 consumers who have, we don't have the patience, we don't have the bandwidth for this, and we're gonna move on to something else. Even those of us who know what's happening and who want it to progress, how many more famous men are gonna be taken down, and pretty soon, and then it starts to become people like Al Franken, who we thought we really believed in, and will start to soften, and this wave will end. How do we, so that I guess turn this into a question for the panel, how do we not succumb to the fatigue of this tsunami of stories and keep the momentum going?
Which is what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you turn this from a social media campaign into something which brings about constructive change?
Yeah.
I think the political
who wants-
activists on our panel probably
Yes.
have some thoughts on that.
I think Rebecca's been a bit quiet recently, so.
Well, I think this is the main challenge that we're facing right now. In France, that with the Macron government, we know that if we want an issue to be tackled by the government, we need to make the headlines. If not, they won't be interested in it. And now that we have the headlines, and now that we have the attention of the government, we are working with them so that there's a effective response from them. But the problem is that they will always have, well, with this government, they have a response that needs to be effective right now, so that, you know, in a couple of years, there's already some effect.
Laws in place.
Yes,
So-
laws in place. And one of the policies that they want to do is to give tickets to people who are harassing people on the street. And so that means that if a woman is being harassed on the street sexually, she can go to a policeman and say, okay, so this man just harassed me, and the policeman then is supposed to give the ticket to the person. But the problem is the police is that we can't do that if we don't have a police that is actually believing us in the first place, which is actually the case when we talk about the...
Excuse me, Macron hasn't come out at all officially with his position on all this
Yeah.
harassment. The Prime Minister hasn't. The Minister of the Interior hasn't. All these feminists have been asking Macron to speak out about this
Yeah.
important issue, but he
He's doing
obviously
it on
doesn't seem to
Saturday.
think it is important because he hadn't spoken about it at all.
Yeah, he's doing it on Saturday,
Ah,
and he
I
has
see.
this...
Why so long? Why has it taken so long for him to speak
Because
out?
it's not that important.
Yes, well, that's
for
the
him.
problem.
He's busy getting Harvey
Yeah.
back from Lebanon, please.
Like when we talk about the feminist issue, he says that he wants a debate first at the assembly and then pass the law,
Well, I
which
think the
is different.
silence is very eloquent.
At this,
Absolutely.
sorry, we're running out of time and we need to move on to the next question. There is somebody here over on this side.
Yeah, one comment first, is I have 3 sons between 26 and 30, and I'm real happy that, I'm surprised, but happy, they seem to be okay. I don't know. And, no, but what I mean is okay. Any kind of behavior, even though I love Al Franken, that's behavior that's not acceptable by anybody. And I just think that at least this next generation, that's where it's all about. Now, I think that, I don't know where they got it from, because I had a bad problem with domestic violence, and I didn't know what to do. So and the police did not help. They said that I should leave the house. But wait, I live there, so there is a bad problem that we gotta still work on, and we won't get tired. Because it's not, when we get tired, that might be, is when, then maybe one day we make some progress, so we're not there yet.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, it was a comment that I was referring back to something Rebecca said before about the issue of, you know, one woman would say something and she's not believed because she's a woman of color, and then when white women, they tended to be more believed, and it was really interesting. It's more of a comment, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. Alexandra Schwartz was speaking on the radio hour, you were talking about podcasts, and she said that one of the things she had recently heard about how men should respond to this is 2-word piece of advice: believe women. And in other words, even if you know that every woman in the world all the time might not be telling 100% of the truth, and there are obviously some instances in which some allegation comes out which is subsequently proven false, set your default switch if you're a man and believe women. And it really hit me, because it's amazing. I think if most men are being honest, they would say that part of the initial reaction is often to question the woman's story, the woman's version of what she's saying. And you'd like to feel that you're very enlightened. And so this is something that I think actually, at least for me personally, I think it's a great piece of advice. I think I would rather err on the side of believing absolutely everything the woman is saying, and then be proven wrong. Okay, well, it comes out in the case of Al Franken, maybe it was, who knows. But it's really interesting.
Apply not just to men, but to other women too.
And to other women as well, absolutely.
Sorry, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, when you just spoke about black
It was,
black
I was
women,
referring
right?
to.
But how do you feel about this being a social problem as well? I mean, you have Betsy DeVos, who's is our Minister of Education, call her, putting in laws that just don't really help students once again on campuses and all of that. She's a super wealthy woman, and I just kind of go, wow. And then there's these cases of rape, and the guy's going to protect. The rich, wealthy man is going to protect his son, he has a career in swimming, really, and she has no life now. This woman that he just raped. So is this a social issue, and how do you feel about that? I have one other question too, because you work for Press 24. Did you work for I-24?
No.
Okay, but the owner of your group, the media group, is a very it's an independent, and it's a person that's very open, isn't he?
No, the France 24 is a public broadcaster. We're funded by the French government.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a French government? I thought it was a personal owner.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
No, I've never worked for I-24. Okay, so
thank you.
I'm just wondering, would you like to answer that question, or
what do you think? Is this a social?
It is totally social. It's also a question of money, I think. It's like we talked about the structure of power earlier, and you have to question this structure of power as a tool for the patriarchal society we live in. And people like women who don't have the money and don't have the means to talk, of course they don't have the same tools as the other woman. It's totally a social issue. That's why intersectionality is so important in the feminist movement. And we have to talk about all women, and all women should be represented, and not only white women.
This is the last question. The lady here with the jumper.
Okay, first of all, I do believe in innocent until proven guilty. Although I think that a rape victim shouldn't, like in Pakistan, have to have 4 eyewitnesses in order to make it believable. But I think we are in a transition period, and I think there'll be before and after this transition. Before this transition in the years past, I think there were many things that were accepted, not acceptable, but accepted. And I think we have to think twice before we ruin the lives of people because they did, as you said, something stupid, maybe once or twice. And then I think if I go into a place and I say, Buster, I don't like what you're doing, that's okay. But if he comes in and he says, hey babe, how things going, then he has to apologize in front of everybody. We lived this experience. So I think transition before and after, and let's not just automatically ruin people's lives because they did something stupid.
But what about this woman's life? Do you think that but do you think that it's that they actually have a glory in saying that she was harassed, or she was the victim of such things? I think no woman wants to go publicly and say that she was a victim of harassment or rape or something, because as we said earlier, she tends to lose her job, she tends to lose the confidence of her relatives, and I don't think herself, yeah, absolutely. No woman does this
There are many societies. You're talking about a Western society.
Well, this is what we're talking about here. I'm not going to talk about society.
Can I make a quick comment?
No, I think at this point we're going to have to wrap it up. I want to thank my wonderful panelists. Please give them a round of applause. Connie Board, who of course came up with the idea.
No matter what anybody thinks, I think
Hollywood did a major thing here. Now, it's true it might die out, it's true, but Hollywood came down really, really strong on this. They have never in the past. I mean, there's been,
And it hasn't
back to
stopped.
Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks. I mean, this has been going on for
Patty
centuries.
Arbuckle.
Patty Arbuckle. I mean, really. And for once, really, Hollywood stood up to it, and we all heard it. Now, it's up to us, it's up to women, it's up to the way we vote, that this has to continue. And may I just mention that this week something very noticeable happened. Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democratic senator,
Yeah.
I'm not being political when I say this, who is completely indebted for her whole entire career to the Clintons, came out against Bill and Hillary. So, it takes a lot of courage. Okay, thank you, you guys. It
All right, so you have been watching a panel discussion here in Paris Live, discussing the Harvey Weinstein and its effect on Hollywood. Don't forget, you can hit the subscribe button by just clicking on this button here in the bottom right-hand corner. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. You can shoot me up with comments on Twitter at Euromaestro or in here in the comments, and I'll answer any questions you have. We'll go around perhaps and talk to some of the people who were here tonight. If you have any comments, go ahead. I can try to get any questions you might have before we close this out. Such a great job. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Can I just ask you a question? We're still filming?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we missed a little bit of the beginning of the broadcast of technical problems. So could you just say who you are so that people would know that they've been watching?
Sure. I'm Anne Bagamary.
Right.
I'm a journalist based in Paris. I used to be the senior editor of the International New York Times and the International Herald Tribune. And I was invited on the panel to talk broadly about how the repercussions of the Weinstein affair are playing in various countries, in various domains. And I think we had a pretty interesting, lively discussion tonight.
I think it was a great discussion. As a matter of fact, I was trying to get a question in because I think a lot of people didn't realize, so there was some news that came out today. There's a second woman that has come forward with allegations against Senator Al Franken. So I think most people here weren't aware of that. And the second allegation is an incident that took place while he was senator, whereas the previous event was before he was a senator. And so I was going to ask, as you remember the panel, do you think that changes things significantly that this woman has now come forward and this relates to activity, more recent activity, while he was a senator?
Does it change it significantly? I don't know. I don't really believe in quantity versus quality in a case like this. So I don't know. I would need to know more about the allegation
Sure,
itself.
of course.
But obviously, Al Franken, after the first accusation, called for a Senate investigation into himself.
He did.
Which you have to give him a lot of credit for doing.
And the accuser was not apparently in favor of the Senate investigation, so that's kind of interesting.
It is interesting. It's a complicated case. These are complicated cases.
Yeah, and the second woman has said that she came forward because the other woman had come forward, and now she felt more at ease. But she does have plenty of contemporaneous witnesses and comments that she made, including a Facebook post.
Well, you have to believe the evidence. You have to believe the data. And as somebody said here tonight, your default position should be believe women. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. What is a theme in a lot of these manifestations, these eruptions, whatever you want to call them, is that women feel more comfortable coming forward. Victims feel more comfortable coming forward when other people have already taken the courageous stand to go public. So,
interestingly enough, the second woman that came forward, she said she was primarily motivated because her incident she felt wasn't as serious, but she came forward because she thought it might make it easier in case there are other women out there, that they would come forward if she came forward. So that was part of her reasoning, she said.
I mean, see how it unfolds, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you so much. All right. So there you go. One of the great panelists on tonight's panel. Let's get a couple more in while we can. I'm interviewing a couple of people.
That's right.
Oh, sorry.
We got the whole
great
thing.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah.
No, I saw that from the very beginning.
I'm still filming.
So
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I prefer not
Sure,
to.
sure. Yeah.
What are you putting it up on?
It's a YouTube Live.
YouTube Live, so I can find it on. Can you send me the link?
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Send me the link. I'd love to. I'd love to be able to link to parts of it, maybe.
Yeah,
or,
sure.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
Anybody with a half a brain.
Sometimes I run the and just stare. You're staring.
Violation.
There's a nice.
I'm just
Yeah, they did a great job. Sorry.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah, right.
So what did you think?
I think the thing that bothers me about the Al Franken story is that, okay, there's one woman who has come forward.
Should I put you on camera?
You can. It's okay.
Oh, I want to give you permission. Yeah.
Well, in the case of Al Franken, one woman came forward, and it's not sure or not clear what political motivation or who put her.
She might have had a political motivation.
Some people are accusing Bannon.
So what I was pointing out, and you're probably not aware, I don't think most people here are aware, is that, because it's kind of breaking news today, but a second woman has now come forward with another allegation against Al Franken. And this one is while he was the senator. So
I was going to preface my remarks by saying that if other women come forward, then I'm wrong.
Well, a second woman has come forward. It's not it's not the same type of allegation, slightly different, but it involves touching, and she felt uncomfortable, and it was in a public place, in fact, in front of her husband, and she came forward. One of the reasons why she said she came forward is because she said in case there were other women out there, she felt her coming forward would make them feel more comfortable telling their stories.
That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But what I knew coming in today was there weren't others.
Right.
But, versus a person like Roy Moore who had multiple.
No, I see what you're saying. If there's just one woman, could be politically motivated, it could be maybe misunderstanding or whatever. But when there's multiple women, it gets harder to justify. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. She does have a photograph of the two, the second woman, and she has several witnesses that she told at the time. So it's not like something she's inventing now, because she told her husband, she told her sister, she told her mother, and there's even Facebook entries written from 7 years ago. So,
Well, this will be in the news tomorrow, I guess.
yeah, you'll see it in the news tomorrow, I'm sure. All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay.
How can you say that? Deanna, do you think it's fun coming out and saying the guy touched my tits? I mean, do you think that's fun? And even if 1 in 10 is making it up just to get back at some guy, it'll come out.
Is 1 in 10 acceptable for a death penalty?
No, but wait, what I didn't get to say is you have to make a difference between what is a crime and what is just
That's right.
Inappropriate.
You have to say.
Inappropriate.
That's right. That's right.
Touching
And we
her
should
tits
go
might
and
in a metro.
the culture should be, and have you change your reasoning. If you have been a victim of a crime,
Don't
go to the
confuse going like this and getting raped,
That's
okay?
right.
I'm sorry, all right?
Can I ask you a question? Can I put you on camera? We're on live. You look gorgeous.
What do you want to ask?
I'm going to ask you about tonight's event. Just a couple quick questions.
Sure.
All right. So let's start with who are you?
My name is Sally Swartz. I'm a vice chair of Democrats Abroad France and co-chair of the Global Women's Caucus for Democrats Abroad.
Wow, that sounds good.
Well, it is good.
All right. So I had a question because we talked a little bit today about some of the allegation against Senator Al Franken. And what I gathered is a lot of people didn't realize is, and I want to know if this affects your opinion, is that now a second woman has come forward with another allegation, and this one took place while he was senator. So,
to me, it makes no difference.
Makes no difference.
I mean, I'm not speaking as an attorney,
Right.
which I am.
Right.
But in terms of whether it's worse or less worse or better, depending upon what his position is, for me it's irrelevant. Bad behavior is bad behavior, no matter what your title is.
Right. Okay. No, because some people here had mentioned during the discussion, well, it was before he was the senator.
Right.
So for some people,
I understand. For me, I don't understand that comment.
Okay. Is it of more concern to you that there is a second woman that comes forward? Does it bolster?
I'm concerned about any man or any woman, for that matter, but I'll leave it at men, who have inappropriate or illegal criminal behavior with women, whether it's once or a million.
Right. But it's not necessarily criminal, right?
No. I don't know what happened to what women Al Franken.
The second allegation, I shouldn't say just, it involves an allegation of inappropriate touching on the buttocks while they were taking a photo together. And apparently, according to news sources, there's a law in Minnesota that specifically says that is not criminal behavior.
Well, then he can't be prosecuted.
Right.
My question
But it could still be
is,
inappropriate.
It's certainly inappropriate. When did it happen? Why is the woman saying this about him now? What has he said, et cetera, et cetera?
Right, sure. A lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
She said one of the reasons she came forward now is because this other woman came forward. And she said that put her more at ease to come forward. And secondly, she said that in case there are other women out there who may have had problems, she said her coming forward might make it easier for them to come forward and feel comfortable that they can do it.
I can understand that position. I may not necessarily agree with it. If somebody touched my butt, I'd smack him.
Right.
And I would tell him if he ever did that again, I'm going to make everyone he knows know about it.
She does have a photo of the two of them taking a picture together, and she has contemporaneous comments at the time saying that she was inappropriately
So why
touched.
is it just coming out now?
It was a private matter between her and her family before.
Understood.
Yeah, but it's there, so I mean, it's not like something she's. I mean, we know that there's contemporaneous comments because they were written on Facebook
Right.
and they're posted.
All I can say is, Al Franken or not Al Franken, this problem has existed for the better part of humanity. It will unfortunately continue to exist, and until women say, I'm not putting up with this anymore, and stop it, then it'll continue to go on as we discussed tonight.
That's
Because
right.
unless people are punished for unacceptable behavior, then they will continue to do it, whether they be men or women.
That's awesome. I got one last question for you.
Sure.
So I had a conversation with Rosie O'Donnell about this issue. So you remember her?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So she had posted on Twitter, I think it was yesterday or the day before, in regards to the Al Franken incident. She said that she had done a live television performance, and Meatloaf, I don't know if you remember Meatloaf.
I remember
Okay,
Meatloaf.
so she said that Meatloaf French kissed her during a live performance, and it wasn't planned. She wasn't expecting it. However, she said she did not feel offended by that. She didn't feel she didn't feel anything negative about it because she says, we're on television, we're actors. She feels, that's part of the game.
Part of the game.
Yeah. So I asked her, my question to her after she posted this, and she was we got into a little exchange, was I said, would you feel that way regardless of who the person was? You know what I mean? Because this was a specific person, Meatloaf. It would have been somebody else, you know? And she said, she responded, she said, it doesn't matter. She says, we're two actors, we're professional, and it shouldn't be an issue. And I guess by implication, you know, because the thing is, this thing, the first allegation involves a skit between Al Franken and the woman involved. Okay, that's where the kiss came from. It was during a skit.
Yeah.
So some people are saying, well, you know, it's part of
I don't think people should judge other people. I think Al Franken did to somebody what he did to somebody, and that somebody,
it's between them.
It should be between them. That is short of, if he's in a public position, which he is now, and the people that have elected him decide that they don't like his morality or his behavior, then they will vote him out of office. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, the discussion ends there.
So you think it should be up to the next election, not up to the Senate Ethics Committee to take a position?
Look, I am not familiar enough with the rules of the Senate to know whether or not that rises to what would open an investigation for the Senate Ethics Committee. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I would like to see what the rules are before answering it. But I think if it does fall within this purview of the Senate Ethics Committee, then it should be investigated, as should be all indiscretions or morally repulsive behavior on the part of other senators.
Mr. Moore, for instance.
He's not a senator.
No.
But if he were, and I may add, unfortunately, be elected by the wise people of Alabama, then I think it would be up to the Senate to impose whatever its rules are.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Sally. Always great answers, as always. Okay. There you go. So we have the words from the vice chair of the Democratic Party, and we'll see if the host of the panel is still around. I'll be right back. I think she may have left. Anne.
Anne?
Yeah, she's still here?
I haven't seen her.
Did the host leave?
Very rich. I was saying that I think
we'll take one more look around the room.
Congratulations on your songs. They sound like fine boys.
I've also done news, so I wanted to talk to Annette.
Keep me employed.
So you're not supposed to feel the applause.
Oh, okay.
We will on our end. We won't let them forget.
Awesome job. Really great. Sorry about the technical issues. I was wondering, would you be willing to answer a couple of questions real quick, or do you have time? Okay. You did a great job. I understand what you're saying. Thank you. But thank you so much. All right, we're going to end it here, guys. We're going to end it here. Thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.